Forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads. Prefer a dunk. And expect nothing but the best. This was the Big Ten. Now this is Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Dace.
Greetings. Welcome to this week's episode of Bigger Ten. We are back in the saddle again after taking a week off with some work duties that both Aaron McIntyre and myself, Steve Dace, had to perform. But Aaron, good to see you again as we are now heading down to the stretch drive of the always where did the time go college football season. Brother, how are you?
Doing well. And yes, it always, even this year with the weird scheduling anomalies where everybody gets 2 bye weeks, it still seems like it has flown by. I was saying in September it went by really fast, and as soon as I said that, it was like Kirk Ferentz saying after or before the Michigan State game they're in really as good of health as they ever have been, and then all of a sudden they get all these injuries. That's how the rest of the year. As soon as I said it felt like September went by really slowly, it seems like the rest of the season has gone by like that.
Well, let's get into it because we've got another set of college football playoff rankings, and the Big Ten figures very prominently. The face of the college football playoff committee is one of our athletic directors, Michigan's Ward Manuel. So let's get into the Big Five here on Bigger Ten, Aaron. And I want to start with a question. Could 11-1 Indiana be left out of the playoff? Because when you look at I know they're fifth right now. They're heavy underdogs to Ohio State. That's a game they likely lose. How far down do they fall? We are looking at a realistic scenario where they're 11-1, Tennessee, Ole Miss, Georgia, Alabama, Texas A&M, all are 10-2 or better. And all of them would have way better wins than Indiana would. So I know the current playoff odds at ESPN are over 90% for Indiana to make the playoffs, thinking, hey, they're 10-0, beat Purdue, that's 11 wins, and Purdue's the worst team in our league. Lose to Ohio State, you're 11-1. No way an 11-1 Big Ten team is going to be left out. This is a very unique situation, though, where you're gonna tell Georgia with wins over Texas on the road, hey. Indiana didn't beat any ranked teams. You're staying home. I don't know. Is the committee going to do that? I don't think the playoff odds that ESPN is citing at 92%. I don't think they're quite that high. I think this is more of a possibility, especially if Ohio State names the score on Saturday. I think this is more of a or in 2 Saturdays. I think this is more of a possibility than people think. But what say you?
Unfortunately, you're probably correct, and it sucks. It really does suck, but you want to hear that if you hear that small sound off in the distance. Do you hear that, Steve?
I do, always, yes.
That small
thought it was
sound
just me.
Off in the distance. That is the sound of Greg Sankey preparing to scream his butt off if Indiana takes a place of one of his SEC teams. If Indiana costs an SEC team a playoff spot, bro, Greg Sankey is going to blow a head gasket. So, unfortunately, that's probably the reality. And it sucks because Indiana has only played who's on their schedule. We've had this conversation ad nauseum. And with the exception of Michigan, they have blown everybody out that they've played. And that game against Michigan, that was a really, really good game for that program. Finally got a chance to really test their mettle when they were tested in terms of the competition and line of scrimmage that you have to be ready for with Big Ten football. But at the end of the day, if they don't have a marquee win against a ranked team, yeah, they're probably going to get left out. That sucks, but I think it is what it is.
Let's reverse it. If we were talking about an SEC team with no wins over ranked teams, and we're talking about 2-loss Michigan, 2-loss Ohio State, 2-loss Oregon, and one of them, and they've all beaten one another, and then they've played one another, and that's why they've got 2 losses. And we're looking at a one-beaten SEC team with no ranked wins, and it's Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon with those 2 losses playing each other. We'd be losing our stuff too over here, wouldn't we?
Yeah, and that, I mean, we would be, but if it was an 11-1 SEC team and the one loss was against who's the best team in the SEC, Texas A&M, are they still on top of the SEC? But then the rest of them were like, most of their wins were against, Vanderbilt, although Vanderbilt is good. If their wins were against, typically bottom to mid-tier of the pack SEC teams, my problem here is the perception that is foisted upon us of the SEC. Mm-hmm. Might they be perennially the best conference in this country? Yeah, probably so. But you got to play the games. Your record has to mean something, regardless of the conference that you're in. And that just that's just not the case. Part of that is just our own human biases, but part of it is just the perennial perception of the SEC, where losses there just don't matter, apparently, as much as they do elsewhere.
All right, let's not just pick on Indiana. Let's get to topic 2. Explain to me the justification for 11-1 Penn State over 11-1 to Indiana. Do you know what it is? I mean, who's Penn State's win at 11-1? Their best win is who? West Virginia in the season opener? That's their best win. They both played Washington. They both played Washington at home. They both ended up winning convincingly. Penn State more so. But you don't ever want to do that level of comparison where you're doing, crossover factors and things of that nature where there's matchups, and Indiana played with its backup quarterback. I mean, what is Penn State's resume at 11-1? I mean, they have a certainly one of the great brand names in the history of the sport, but how's their strength of record that much better than Indiana's given who they've played?
Again, it's the same. The answer is just the same, just a different context. It's the perception. Mm-hmm. They're a blue blood. Indiana is not. Yeah. So that's all there. That's the only justification at all.
Well, that brings us to in a couple of weeks on deck. Both of them basically have byes. Indiana officially has a bye. Northwestern is Ohio State's opponent this week. That's effectively a bye for the Buckeyes. So we'll break this down more next week. But this is version 3.0 of the Big Ten game of the year. Version 1.0, Ohio State went out to Oregon, lost at the last second. Version 2.0, Ohio State went to Penn State and held on at the last minute. So version 3.0, the Buckeyes hosting the Hoosiers. I have to tell you, getting an idea of, getting a chance finally to see a team with a higher, I don't want to say elite, even though the names are elite. Michigan's defensive line has not always played elite this year. But in terms of athletic profile, that is an elite group. It's certainly a tier above what Indiana has faced and most teams in college football will face, but they could not block them. And it took Michigan a while to figure that out. Wink was still pretty stubborn about blitzing and leaving hot receivers for Rourke to throw the ball to. And then finally in the second half, and he's like, you can't even block my front four, so I'm just going to sit back here and cover. Yeah, that really bottled Indiana up. They only had 24 yards, I think, or something like that, rushing in the second half. So I wonder if you complement, I don't think Ohio State's defensive front is quite as good as ours, but it is certainly in the elite camp. And then you couple that with an offense that is way better. I mean, Michigan's offensive execution, I'm in favor of it. All right. So, the Ohio State offense is on another solar system compared to Michigan's. So now you're in a position where you're playing a Michigan caliber defense, but their offense is probably scoring 28, 31 points on top of that. I don't see the game script there for Indiana minus, something like Ohio State's -3 in turnovers or something. But that's my early read of that game. What do you think?
Well, last week on Confidence Picks, I said I'm done saying, I think this could be a weird game for Indiana. I think this could be a trap game for Indiana. I'm done doubting them. And then as soon as I said that, they finally had probably their worst looking outing of the season. Having said all that, and I know this is not grounded in logic or facts, I'm just not going to say, I don't like this matchup for Indiana at all. Because every time that I've said that, they've proven me wrong, so that's the long and short of my analysis. If you put a gun in my head, I would say probably, your analysis as far as how they'll hold up based on what we saw against Michigan, probably going to end up being correct. But I just don't. This is going to be their season. Kurt Cignetti, if we know anything about him so far this year, is that he knows how to get a chip on the shoulder. I mean,
No
that's
doubt.
his middle
Yeah.
freaking name. So he's
Yep.
going to have them fired up. I don't know if that equates to going into the horseshoe and being competitive with Ohio State. I don't know. But as far as the mental advantage, I mean, that's going to be Indiana. They're going to be playing for their season. And that's totally unfair because they're going to come in at 10-0. But based on the conversations we just had, that is their season. It's that one game against Ohio State. So they're going to be absolutely fired up. So, again, I know that's not grounded in facts or logic or anything like that, but that's how I see this one shaking out.
I mean, it's going to be one of the biggest games in Indiana football history.
Yes.
Certainly the biggest they've played since in '87. They played at Michigan State at the end of the year. The winner was going to win the Big Ten and go to the Rose Bowl. And Lorenzo White at Michigan State won that game. It's certainly the biggest game they played since then. But neither team was considered a national championship contender. That was kind of considered kind of a down year in the Big Ten. I think Michigan State ended up 9-2-1. And won the Big Ten and the Rose Bowl. You probably have to go back to 1967 when they played against O.J. Simpson and USC in the Rose Bowl. But this might end up being even bigger than that game, given where both teams are going to be ranked. Let's go to topic 4. You know, we've been tossing around this kind of theorem on Big Ten football this year, that the league is basically 4 teams that look like playoff teams, one truly awful, horrible team in Purdue, and then the other 13 teams, depending on injury situation and if you're playing them home and away, can just look completely different going against each other week to week. And it appears that your Iowa Hawkeyes have proved our theorem.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, 2 weeks ago against a Wisconsin team that has been a program generational thorn in the side of Hawkeye Nation, Iowa just goes out there and absolutely embarrasses the Badgers in prime time. Just embarrasses them. One of the most dominant performances that Iowa has had against Wisconsin since Barry Alvarez resurrected that program. Maybe the most dominant one. And then the very next week goes out against UCLA, takes a 10-0 lead, and then looks like it forgot how to play intercollegiate football for basically the next 2.5 quarters. I mean, just injuries, meltdowns, mistakes, benchings. That's kind of our theorem right there, right? Didn't Iowa just essentially prove it? If you're on the road,
Yep.
Who knows? If you're on the road, man, good luck. If you're at home, you can look great. But if you're on the road, thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, and Minnesota was on the road against Rutgers last week as well.
Thoughts and prayers.
Yes.
Lost to their old quarterback.
Yeah. So it's really, really frustrating. I think a lot of fans are really frustrating because it's like the team that they saw at home is just not the same at all. And it doesn't matter really where on the road you're going. I mean, Michigan State was a time zone away, and Iowa looked like they had never, as you said, never played the sport before up in East Lansing, never forced Michigan State to punt. I think maybe they punted, maybe they forced UCLA to punt once or twice, but it is really, really weird. And again, I think looking back on it, I know as the season goes on in seasons past, we've mentioned the bus tour less and less as the season goes on. I don't know, man. It seems like they pretty much had the Big Ten pegged this year, maybe with the exception of Rutgers, but I don't even remember what the stop was like. But I remember towards the end of the bus stop, they kind of said the same thing that you're saying. There's 2 or 3 teams. Indiana was not one of them, but 2 or 3 teams at the top that look really, really good, and the rest are kind of the same. And the biggest difference is going to be coaching. I don't even think coaching is making that big of a difference with some of these teams.
Well, I remember Howie, who doesn't like to criticize, said that Indiana is still noticeably thin at several positions. I remember Jerry DiNardo said Michigan's got a very athletic offensive line. They're going to be fine there.
I smell something.
I remember Jerry DiNardo said, "Well, this looks like every other Penn State team we've ever seen." Actually, you know what? He's right about that.
Yeah.
It's just it is every other James Franklin Penn State team, just with a much weaker schedule. So. On that part, he was correct. All right, so let's, again, give some flowers here to close this out to Dylan Gabriel. He's just setting records routinely now. He is the all-time NCAA leader for total touchdowns. What an incredible mark. And at this point, my read of the Heisman is I think it is a 3-man race. I think Cam Ward can still win it if Miami goes undefeated the rest of the way, and he's terrific. But I think if Oregon is undefeated, I think Dylan Gabriel is going to win it. I think if Alabama ends up winning the SEC, I think Jalen Milroe will win it. If both of those things happen, I don't know who wins it. And then if neither of those two things happen, but Colorado wins the Big 12, I think Travis Hunter will win it.
Wow.
So that's kind of my read currently on the Heisman. And I'm hoping the latter scenario does not happen, because I have a very considerable futures bet on Jalen Milroe, Cam Ward, and Dylan Gabriel. I don't have any bets on Travis Hunter, so I'm not rooting for that scenario.
Well, I'm hoping
what are your thoughts?
I am hoping the first scenario comes out, because I got $25 on Dylan Gabriel at like 10-1 or something like that. So I'm polling for that to come through. That'll buy you dinner at Chipotle these days.
Probably a few. That'll buy you a few dinners, brother. But I think, yeah.
Nah, not anymore. Have you been to Chipotle recently? So. I don't know what superlatives I could give that haven't already been given to Dylan Gabriel, but he's got to be in the Hall of Fame, in the College Football Hall of Fame. And this is not just, I want to reiterate something. This is not just a product of him having all of these years of eligibility. He's making the most of every single year that he's played. He really is. He's played and executed at a high level for the years that he's been given. And yeah, it's anomalous because with the COVID years and all of the extra eligibility that he's been able to enjoy, but he still made hay while the sun shine. So hats off to him. I think we're out of superlatives for him.
And every time he's moved up, he's gotten better.
Yeah.
He went from a very good group of 5 quarterback, and sometimes those guys don't translate when they go Power 5. Well, now Power 4, but it was still Power 5. When he went to Oklahoma, he was absolutely sensational there. He comes to our league, and Oregon's program historically is not Oklahoma's, even though in recent history they've been about the same. But our league plays way more defense than the Big 12 or the group of 5. And he has come in and dominated our league as well. So he's just one of the all-time. I have no idea that he'll ever play a meaningful snap in the NFL, given his size. But he is one of the all-time great college football quarterbacks from a statistical profile standpoint. No doubt about it. All right, we'll come back after this break. Let's play some Would You Rather. All right, Aaron, let's play some Would You Rather here on Bigger 10. I'll start with you. I've asked this question before, but now that we are in the midst of the College Football Playoff Committee revelations with the 12-team playoff, let me ask it again. Would you rather be the head of the College Football Playoff Committee or the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee? What do you think?
This one's easy for me. It's head of the College Football Playoff Committee. Much more powerful. You're much more powerful, and the decisions are much more consequential. I think the selection committee for the NCAA tournament does just a fine job. There are very few times where I'm like, oh, that team should have been that team. There's dozens of games in the college basketball season. If you can't prove yourself definitively over the course of the season, you don't really have a right to complain most of the time when the selection show comes on at the end of the season. College football selection committee, though, based on the conversations that we just had about Indiana, based on the conversation that I just launched and has relaunched about the perception of the SEC, yeah, I'd like to put my thumb on the scale if I were on the college football playoff committee. This one is for you. Would you rather bet Northwestern plus 28.5 or Purdue plus 28.5? Northwestern playing Ohio State, Purdue playing Penn State.
Whew. I mean, Northwestern's the better team. Penn State minus 28 is already one of the picks I've given out for this week on our Patreon. So, but I guess if you because Purdue's playing at home, I guess I'd go Purdue at home. Maybe, Penn State can't empty the bench. It's a travel squad. So that's actually the reason not to pick them, because then Penn State maybe can't stop itself from scoring. And James Franklin likes to cover the number. I think we all know that. You know what? That's why I'm going to go Ohio State or Northwestern. They're the better team. They have the better defense. I think there's a chance they could muck that thing up and win and lose like 31-3. So you cover by the hook.
That's at Wrigley Field, right?
That's right. I forgot about that. You're right.
Do you remember when they played Iowa?
The wins there 2 years ago with C.J. Stroud. Yes, I forgot about that.
Do you remember the Iowa game last year at Wrigley Field? They had basically potholes all over the field, muddy potholes.
That's right. How did I've totally forgot about that. So you just sold me on that. Not to mention, I kind of think Ryan Day would love a mucker, grinder, didn't look great. The week before, you've got Indiana and Michigan back-to-back to close the year. Something where all these guys with these high NIL paydays and draft board projections, you got something legit to just get on them about and yell at them about, right? Build a little of that angst up a little bit, you know. I think he wouldn't mind a kind of a mucker grinder kind of a game to have one more opportunity to get on his team and recalibrate them for the final drive here. So I'll go Northwestern.
All right, this one is from you.
Would you rather be Lincoln Riley or Sharon Moore this offseason? That starts next month, by the way. This by this time next month, major NIL deals are going to be done in the transfer portal. We'll only be a week away from signing day. So both of these guys are absolutely on the hot seat heading into 25. They both need massive renovation projects in terms of the one-loss record and where the program is at. So which one of these two guys would you rather be heading into that crucial offseason for both?
You know, I would have said Lincoln Riley, but what you brought up on Michigan podcast yesterday has me reconsidering regarding the elephant in the room of Sharon Moore and the dynamics at play at Michigan when it comes to they don't want to fire the first black head coach. So probably for that reason, I'd rather be Sharon Moore. But on the other side, you know, this kind of gets forgotten a little bit, but didn't they purchase Lincoln Riley like a gigantic house in L.A.? That was one of his bonus things.
Yes.
They did that to get a 7-5 record, right?
No. No, they did not.
I would really not rather be I wouldn't want to be either one of these individuals, but probably I would rather be Sharon Moore going into this offseason. I think they'll probably give him another shot. I don't think he deserves it, but they probably will give him another shot. Finally, for you, would you rather be Matt Rule or Lincoln Riley going into this weekend's game? Who has more pressure?
Well, I think Lincoln Riley does for sure. You're at home. You swapped out who's a really good quarterback. I mean, Miller Moss, top 5 in our league in QBR, top 20 nationally in quarterback efficiency. I don't think anybody thought, I mean, I'm not saying that Miller Moss is Caleb Williams, but did anybody around the country talking about, I think Miller Moss is the reason USC has lost is 4-5. No one's had that conversation. So, and now you're going to start a high profile youngster recruit in that position. I think Nebraska's probably got a little new blood with Dana Holgerson coming in as OC. I mean, he has been one of the better offensive minds in our sport here in the last couple of decades at a couple of different schools. So and USC's at home, but I think we all know ain't going to be, there's going to be a lot of Nebraska fans there. I mean, in LA, if you're not great, no one shows up. So I would rather be Matt Rule. I would.
All right. That's it.
All right. We'll come back. We'll wrap things up with our Twitter poll results and our feedback of the week next. All right. This week's Twitter poll results or X poll results. Does 11-1 Indiana with a loss to Ohio State make the college football playoff? Aaron, 86% said yes. 14% said no. I'm not so sure the odds are that high, but what do you think?
Yeah, I voted yes just because I was trying to see the results of the poll. I do that. I have a bad habit of doing that. When I just see them, when I'm scrolling on Twitter and I just want to see the results of a poll, I just vote for anything. Yeah, here's what we need to do.
Should I cut Aaron's salary in half? I'll just click on yes. You want to see the results? Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Here's what we should do. This will fix all of our problems. We should expand the...
Nice. I knew that's what you're going to say. I knew it. Yes. Just have a 16-team playoff.
Why not 18? 24.
You know what I would do?
Throw everybody in the playoff. A 132-team playoff.
Here's exactly what I would do. A 32-team playoff, and then there's no bowl games.
Yeah.
The top 32 teams advance. That's still only, there's 130 teams, so what's that? 30% of the sport, 20% of the sport advances to the playoff. Everybody else stays home. That's what I would do. Similar to, I'd expand the NCAA basketball tournament to 128 and no other tournaments.
It's what That's what FCS does.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think there might be I think FCS only has 11 games in the regular season, something like that, maybe.
Mm-hmm. But
why not?
Instead of the Gasparilla Bowl, play another playoff game.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. Yeah.
Or tie in all the sponsorships to these bowl games.
Same exact thing. Make this round game is sponsored by Gasparilla. This one is sponsored by Bad Boy Motors. This one's sponsored by Duke's Mayo. Just transfer those sponsorships over to the playoff games.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. You can even play the games at those places if you want to do that. All right, let's get to the feedback of the week. This is from Mike Dreary, who on the Indiana question says, too many unknowns. If they get beat bad by Ohio State with no signature wins, a 2-loss SEC team like Georgia would overtake them. I agree. They would. I agree. So Indiana fans are thinking, you guys screwed us in 2020 when you changed the rules so Ohio State could get to the Big Ten championship game, and now you're talking about us getting screwed again? Yeah, that's pretty much what we're talking about. So, you know what? I do think if it's a respectable loss, 31-20, 31-21, a backdoor cover with a touchdown late, you do provide the system less political cover to do to you what it would probably like to do to you if that happens. I do think that.
True.
All right, that'll wrap it up for this week's episode of Bigger 10. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, share, 5-star review, whether you're watching right here on YouTube, listening on iTunes, or elsewhere. Those things help us to find more Big Ten sports fans just like you. So thank you for doing that. Let's keep that going as well. You can follow us on X or Twitter in between episodes at Bigger 10 there, at Bigger 10 there. We will return next week. Until then, I'm Steve Dace. He's Aaron McIntyre. We'll see you then right here on Bigger 10.